at my full screen. Welcome everybody to Replenish. Hope that sustains in the midst of adversity. This is a safe place where I invite special guests to share their encouragement and insight for those of us on the journey of raising kids from hard places. So whether you're a foster parent, adoptive, kinship, or safe family, this conversation is for you. I'm your host, Tristan McGee. And before I introduce our special guest, I just wanted to let you know that the chat is open, so feel free to talk amongst each other. There's a few of our Replenish friends on there that can help you answer questions and whatnot. And just to remind you, I will be on a half an hour after from 5:30 to 6 to continue answering your questions. So today I have invited Susan Jones. She is the author of this wonderful book, Relentless, that we'll be talking about. And she is joining us for a conversation about living fully and loving bravely. So hi, Susan.
Hi, everyone.
All right, before we get really into it and started, let me just tell everybody some of the things that make you so amazing. So Susan Killeen Jones is a nationally certified counselor and clinically trained TBRI educator and coach. She specializes in supporting resilience in both children and adults that have experienced the hard places that often come with the journey of adoption, foster care, divorce, and other childhood traumas. Susan has over 25 years of experience as both a clinician and mother of 5. She knows both the joys and the challenges of developing resilience from a place of personal experience and is grateful to come alongside others in their journey. As well as she's the author of this book, which has brought us to this moment, right, Susan?
Yes, thankfully. Thank you. So thanks for having me. It's so nice to see all of you.
Oh, yes. We're so excited. A friend who's on this call, Sarah, who I introduced you to, she's the reason that actually we're here together tonight. She introduced our support group, our adoption support group, to your book, and we fell in love with it and hunted you down and asked you if you would come on today. So why don't you start off with telling us a little bit about what started you on this journey of helping kids from hard places. You're a clinician and all of these things. So what started you on the journey of wanting to work with this group of people?
I think initially I would have told you that just naturally I was pulled to working with children. I'm the oldest of 7, so I have, 6 siblings, 5 sisters and a brother, all younger than me. So it was just from birth kind of meant to care for kids, and I really like children. So I think it was a natural fit to always want to work with kids as a counselor. I'm kind of a kid person, and knew kind of early in grad school that I wasn't suited to work with couples or just different tracks that you could have gone down. But then I was called to embrace kids from the hard places in my personal life. And again, I think initially would have told you that the reason was because I believed to whom much is given, much is required. And so those were my kind of stated beliefs, like this is a natural fit. We have so much to give, so much love, etc. And so it felt like a natural fit. Now, later, I was talking to my former boss and good friend, Frank Block, who said, some people who are drawn to this type of work have some childhood issues of their own to explore. And he said it as kind of a friendly and gentle, nudge to be aware. And I think I would tell you now that my own childhood history probably drove me to want to help other kids. Mm-hmm. So I think all of us have a story, and mine definitely kind of gave me that nudge.
Yeah, I can I hear what you're saying. Like, I too feel like now, like looking back on this, I think part of what drove me into this, and I've always worked with kids, even before we ended up adopting and we ended up even understanding trauma in children. But just with the heart of wanting to help kids in general, because of the same reason I understood the pain and hardship of being a kid, having some of my own trauma. And so I totally relate to what you're saying as far as being drawn to it, um, kind of from our own wounded place.
Our own place. And sometimes we don't recognize that. Right, of course, like when we're filling out papers for our adoption and talking to the social workers and doing everything and in that relentless pursuit for a child, I don't know that it for sure for me wasn't on my the horizon of my awareness at all. But in time, having done my own work and kind of, kids from the hard places kind of force some issues to be reckoned with in such a way. So definitely now I can see how those dots would be connected. Mhm.
So Susan, refresh me. Do you have adopted kiddos?
Yes.
And how many and how did that kind of come about? Just so the people on this call can kind of get a place of your own personal experience as well as your
Yeah.
clinical experience.
So as a counselor, I was working with children, and then I started working with a church here in Louisville, Kentucky, that had a large ministry to Ukraine, and so there were a lot of adoptive families coming home from Ukraine with kiddos and coming for counseling for help, and so that was kind of one thing that was going on. I had my husband and I had two biological kids and really enjoyed parenting, loved that whole season of life, and you know thought maybe it had something to do with us. I thought I was a good mom. This is easy. I had no clue. I just had kind of easy kids. And then I suffered a miscarriage, and we really wanted to grow our family, and there were a lot of adoption ministry things happening all around me that I was a part of. And so we put our application in to adopt, and it's a really kind of long story. We started in one country, ended up we started in foster care, ended up in traveling to Bulgaria, and finally ended up adopting through Guatemala, and then later to older children from Ethiopia. So 5 kids in total, 3 of whom were adopted, age ranging from, well, today 16 to 26, so a 10-year gap. So
So
yeah.
how old were they when you adopted them?
So our youngest, Gracie, was 6 months old when she came home from Guatemala, and then our other 2 children, Michael and Calcadon, were on paper 4 and 6, probably a little bit older
Okay.
in reality. So
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And
I,
then my bio kids were, I think, let's see, 8 and 10. So so that gap, 6 months up to 10. Yeah.
wow.
So
Wow.
full house.
Yeah.
And again, I had by that point been teaching a lot of courses on adoption and attachment, and had the head knowledge, and thought that I would, figure things out as they came up. And in reality, it was much, much harder than I had anticipated. And I found out that, I may be an okay mom, but not some stellar mom. That kids are all very different, and kids with trauma definitely gave me a run for my money. So there's a big difference between head knowledge and experiential knowledge. So the reason I love TBRI and that I feel like I'm pretty well versed in it now is because I desperately needed it, and it kind of really saved me in many ways.
Yes, us too. And I so appreciate hearing you say that as a clinician, like all this head knowledge. I still feel that way sometimes today. I have all this TBRI, as a TBRI practitioner myself also, I have all this head knowledge and do these trainings. And then sometimes it can just be a challenge when it comes to the 24/7 lifestyle, because that's what it is. It's a lifestyle. It's not like you can have these tools and strategies you can just pull out here and there, and then, your kids are different people. It's like, no, no, it's about us changing our lifestyles.
Yeah, and some of the triggers of kids being very reactive and rejecting, that triggered some of my stuff as well. And I went through all the TBRI training. I had followed Dr. Purvis around the country, early on. Like I loved Karen Purvis when she had big hair, like back in the day, right? And but at one point I remember calling the Texas Christian University and just asking for help, just wanting desperately to talk to someone. And they asked me a lot of questions about attachment and how much I knew, and I gave all the right answers. And they said, "Well, do you have an attachment therapist in your area? You seem very knowledgeable about attachment." And I said, "I am the attachment therapist in this area," through tears, because again, that head knowledge and just the day-to-day practical experience was so vastly different.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one thing I was kind of taken off guard from was my husband and I have actually done a lot of work on our own past, and a lot of our own healing and coming to terms with some of the hard things that we'd been through. Um, and so we thought we were in this place where we wouldn't be triggered in those same ways, but and of course the same thing as got this amazing bio kid that I thought, oh, we're such great parents, but really he's just an easy kid. And then but what I've realized, in this, because I've been in this 10 years as well, is that it I had to go back and revisit some of those old traumas, that in ways that I didn't think I didn't anticipate, because I felt like as we do this, I've worked hard to learn how to draw boundaries, and then when we have kids who have these trauma issues and their behavior pushes you and you can't draw those same type of boundaries, it totally changes um, the way you interact and can go about looking at this stuff, and really challenges you, and you have to, I feel like I don't know who wouldn't have to go back
And dig, yeah,
yeah.
and do the work. And I feel like it is really God's invitation to go deeper still, and to just become even more aware of what it is that we're asking Him to heal. So it's not just a praying like a game of hot potato, where you're just throwing it up, but really it for me caused me to go back and really examine, like, where's the brokenness. And one thing I learned as well is, like, I can't compare my pain or my trauma to someone else, because I would always kind of negate, well, at least I didn't go through X, Y, and Z. I was hospitalized early for several weeks without my family around, because back in the day they didn't do that. And my parents got divorced. So I would think, big deal. I worked that out. It's not a big deal. But ultimately, it really was a sense inside of a place of fear when things feel out of control and I feel alone in it, that it was triggering for me. And so just to recognize that our childhood stories are embedded kind of in cellular memory, and the body keeps the score of all that. And sometimes I would think, I know what I want to be doing and how I want to be behaving, but my body is reacting in such a way that I'm shaking and I'm getting nervous and I'm getting really hyped. And what is that? So I had a doctor who said, listen to me when I say, the body keeps the score and the body always wins. And, he was quoting Bessel van der Kolk, but at the time I didn't know. And I thought, yeah, you're right. And no willpower or grit is going to change that. I need deep healing, and I need to understand what this is that's going on with me so that I can be the parent my kids desperately require me to be. So, so yeah, it was, and as a counselor, I had done my work as well, and we're kind of required to do that, even through school. And so it was pretty eye-opening, like, oh, here we are again.
So how can you help people who are maybe struggling to understand, is it me or is it my child? Because I remember feeling like that, like exactly like what you're saying, kind of feeling shaky inside and not wanting to respond in a certain way, but yet not having the ability to respond in the way that I knew, um, academically, intelligently wise, not having the ability to respond in that way. And just standing there and thinking to myself, like, why can I not act in the way that I know I should act? And just kind of not knowing, not being like freezing almost.
Yeah.
And so how can you help people? And it took me a while to get to the place where I realized, like, um it was a journey. It wasn't like, oh, I need to work on myself. It was a journey to get to that place, to recognize that. So how can you, maybe, is there something that you can say or that we can recognize to help people recognize, um, when it is them that needs to do the work? And like, what could you say to that?
Well, I think everyone can benefit from doing some work, so you're never going to make the mistake of like, oh gosh, I did work and it wasn't me. So I think all of us can do work till the day we die, right? We're being transformed every day. So I would say some of the first things I try to work with people on is creating a safe place for yourself. We talk about that, having a holding safe place for our children, and with that acronym, if you're probably familiar, but being playful, loving, accepting, curious, and with empathy, and self-compassion. And so I think initially, being aware of how are you talking to yourself in those moments, in those moments of being someone, or coming across in a way where we don't want to be that way and feeling like we've fallen short. How are you speaking to yourself in those moments, and what are you doing? Because if you are answering yourself with criticism and harshness, you're making matters so much worse. And so if you can instead be kind of a little bit lighter, more accepting, this is where I am, what is it's going on with me, and just wondering about it a little bit, without such intensity and such criticism. I think that's the place where we begin.
Right. Yeah, and I just love this conversation, that it almost normalizes too that there's going to be a struggle. Like, you can't take in someone with trauma and expect not to experience that trauma, because you're taking on that trauma yourself. And I don't know how that trauma triggers your trauma, but it does. And
It does,
I
yeah.
love, you had this quote. You got me so quick in the book, because on the page 3, which is pretty much the first page in the introduction, you said, parenting children with early life trauma and loss can at times feel like experiencing a storm that never ends. And I was like, this lady gets it. And I was sold on, like, I got to dig into this.
Thank you. It does feel like a storm, and it feels like, why am I a storm chaser? Like, what is wrong with me that I want to have another child that's also like stormy. My family was like, oh yeah, because your first child was so easy that you adopted. Why are you doing this again? And so yeah, it feels like, what what is going on here? But certainly I think trauma brings trauma brings some things with it. And parenting is hard. I always say, and I think Karen Purvis may have said this first, but parenting is hard and adopting is hard. So why would we not expect adoptive parenting to be difficult?
Mhm.
And um and parenting is often hard, and I think she compared it to chemistry. Like chemistry is hard, but AP chemistry is just that much tougher.
We're
And
in the AP class.
we are in an AP class. There you are.
Finally. I'm a high achiever.
Exactly.
Oh,
Just didn't
awesome.
even know. We need to be getting some credit here.
I know, right? I think ultimately we are.
Yeah. I think, the ultimately, like, aren't we learning so much more about ourselves that we never probably would have known, having deeper healing than we never would have experienced? I think had we known up front, we might have been hard pressed to sign up for the journey, but for sure, there's no way I would trade it for anything in the world now.
Right.
Um, it's but it is, the Army's got nothing on. It's the toughest job you'll ever love, right? Like it's
Right. Yeah, I remember someone saying that before we adopted, that adoption changed them in ways they never would have otherwise changed. And
yeah,
I have to say that that is true, and it's for good. It's been hard, and nobody really wants I wish I could just be okay, like, and not have to struggle through the hard work of change. Um, but now that I'm here, I so much more appreciate the person I am, and the compassion I have, and the strength, and um, my faith, and who I've become so much better. And like you said, it's like there's no regrets, even though in the moment I may feel regretful, like in the long overall big picture. And I'm on this side of the healing. Like
right.
when
Sure.
I was in the midst of that struggle, I could not have said that.
Right. Right. I agree with you so much, and I definitely had my days of thinking, what did we do, and how are we going to get through this, and really crying and yelling at God, like, because I know, I feel very, very confident that we did what we were called to do, but having those moments of just saying, okay, well, you called me to this, you got me here, I need you to show up and help me in this situation, because I've got nothing, and I'm at the end of myself. And so, yeah, definitely have those moments. And I think the timing of you reaching out for this book is, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, it's interesting to me, and I'm grateful for it, because had it happened at the wrong time, I might have been hard pressed to really be as encouraging as I can be now, because I'm on this side of the healing.
Right. Yeah. I remember there were times I could not even encourage other people who wanted to foster or adopt. I was like, "Oh gosh, you're in for it. I can't back you." But now I can. I mean, that's just, when you're in the struggle, it's hard. You're not in a place of encouragement. Um, but I want to read, you had another line in your book where it says, I have often said, meaning you, that parenting through adoption feels as if it is more about the sanctification of parents than it is the journey of a child into a family.
Mm.
And I just think that's so important to know, not only before you start to understand that, but even for parents who are in the journey, who are struggling.
Yeah. Yeah. I know for a fact that, God doesn't waste our pain, and that the struggle is not without the fruit at the end, and it's worth it. I think it's gosh, it's a lesson like no other. We, again, probably wouldn't sign up for. I don't know that I would have had the courage to sign up for it,
Mhm.
but so grateful, because I have learned how to appreciate life in a different way, and to be present in each moment, and to really kind of love myself. I don't know that I ever loved myself in a way of um, just being able to show self-compassion instead of criticism and performance and all that jazz.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that because I think so many of us, when we're in that struggle, um, really have a hard time uh, loving ourselves. I want to read another quote. I could read your whole book, just sit here and be the audio person for everybody. But you said the struggle comes in reality that we can't hit pause on our children's journey while we take a break and get our own issues worked out first. It's up to us to learn how to do both at the same time. So I think that's where a big, hard aspect of this is. So I don't know, can you speak into a little bit about your insights on how we hold both?
Yeah, gosh, I was just like, yeah, that's good. That's and I meant like, yeah, that's really true. I meant that when I wrote that. That it would be so nice if we could hit pause on them or ourselves, but oftentimes these things are happening at the same time, and it's kind of like two porcupines trying to relate. You know, our quills are up, or our defenses are up, and I think it's a matter of you know, being able to just be living your truth. You know, with my kids, I am able to say, like, I just really blew it. I'm sorry. You know, can I have a do-over? Can I try this again? That didn't feel respectful of you. And you know, I apologize. And that type of interaction, I think, shows our children that, you know, it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to try again, and to be vulnerable and real, and not just in this situation, but hopefully for the rest of their life. And that's a skill set for resilience for all of us. And so I think it is a matter of being able to, if we're not able to give the kind of love that is healing and healthy, but we need to walk away because we are feeling reactive, that we say, I need a timeout and I'll get back with you. And to, you know, learn how to set those boundaries for ourselves of, you know, and just taking care of ourselves in the moment so that we can come back. Because if we don't follow the path of healing, I just don't see how we can do that for our kids.
Right.
I don't see how we can take them down a path that we're not willing to travel.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear is like it goes back to what you said. That one friend of yours said is that the biology always wins, and so if we don't learn, I, I say to myself, like, if I am going to co-regulate my child, or they're going to co-regulate me. Meaning, I'm either going to set that example for my child, or I'm going to let their reactivity trigger me, and I'm going to become reactive. So
Yeah.
I've got to set that stage, and that's where, like, exactly what you're saying, that hard work comes in. And that there is a couple things I liked you saying in um, apologizing to our children, or letting them know when we mess up, and coming back to them, and asking them, you know, whether it's forgiveness, even if it's 10% and they did 90, you know, me owning my 10%, it that alone, I mean, you said that, and that alone was huge for me. That was hard for me because my parents never apologized to me. So I never had that example to follow. So it was really hard for me to spit those words out and come to that place, um, where I could be kind of transparent with my own brokenness in a sense, and admit that, like, yeah, I'm not perfect. I'm going to mess up. But that's a hard journey in and of itself, I think, for people to be a parent, because it's not what a traditional parent is, you know?
Well, I think, you know, we have to decide, do we want obedience, or do we want to teach and get cooperation and end up with a child who is, you know, solution oriented, respectful, and all those things, and is able to regulate? Because we can get obedience with fear tactics and this power play, but I think at the end of the day, that's really not what we want. We really want kids who are able to problem solve, and to be able to apologize, and to be able to have all these other skill sets that we have to model. So, yeah, a lot of us were just raised differently, where definitely we had parents that were in authority. They said jump, we said how high. We didn't ask, you know. One, I don't think that builds the character that we're looking for in our kids, but two, kids with trauma brains, that really just doesn't work. It's anytime there's this threat, it's going to escalate kids and their defense mechanisms. So we're going to get the opposite. And what happens sadly is then they escalate and we escalate, then they take it up a notch, we take it up a notch, and then everything is spiraling out of control. And you know, none of us win. None of us get what we want in that scenario.
And then, so there's, and then what about the flip side? So those of us who are on this TBRI journey and the compassionate parenting, I feel like some people, and there's some, question going on in the chat about like being too empathetic. Like, how do you know, how do you balance being empathetic and maybe lowering the bar too much, or feeling like your kid's getting away from or away with,
Right.
such and such? It's
Well,
like such a good, it's like, that's like the flip side, right? Because then
right.
you're on this side trying to balance all of that stuff.
That's so true. And I think, TBRI, Dr. Purvis would have said structure, nurture, right? It's always about structure, nurture, and the balance. And so that part of structure is, here are the boundaries, and here's what happens when you do X. This is what, kind of that logical response, but it's given in a way that is in control, not a fear-based power control type of stance. And it is more like, you can give a consequence with empathy. Like, gosh, it's just too bad. I'm really sad that was your choice and that this is the outcome. That makes me sad for you. You can still do some of that and hold kids accountable, so that's not just anything they do is okay. They also, all of us have to learn that every choice we make will have some kind of outcome, but there's a little bit more grace of, can you take a moment and try that again? I'm giving you another chance to get this right, and understanding that this is difficult, because their natural tendency may be to go to fight, flight, or freeze. It's hard to do that higher level thinking in the frontal lobe when you're stuck in the stem brain of the amygdala. So, so it's both, but that structure, nurture, balance is what we're shooting for, not all one or the other.
Right, right. And they may be capable when they're not feeling that dysregulation. But when they're, like, exactly what you're saying, when they're in that state of dysregulation, most likely then they are no longer capable, because their thinking brain is kind of offline.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the hardest part for me, because I had two, and I think my daughter's in here somewhere. Hi, Allison. I had two kids that were really smart kids, and my style of parenting was like educational teaching style. And my other kids needed something different. And when they were in that state of dysregulation, I would try to reason with them or talk to them, even though I knew better, but it was just my go-to. It's how it's my natural tendency. And they couldn't hear me in that place. They couldn't take direction or anything in that place until they were calm and regulated. So, but that was counterintuitive to me as a parent that had been doing that for 10 years. It's like, right, suddenly I got to change up the game. And even still, I have teenagers, and they definitely keep me on my toes, even with all the practice that I've had.
Yeah, I had a hard time believing that my son was dysregulated when he was dysregulated, like believing that they talk about disarming fear, and believing that fear was at the source of that, that fight, flight, or freeze response. That really took me a while to I want to say believe, but just own, like, and respect, and act as though that was true.
Yes, because it looks really different sometimes. It looks like a smirky smile, being very calm, or, and oh, when you're up to here, yeah, I've had some moments that I'm not really proud of, you know, and it just takes such great intentionality and ability to walk away and to factor in, I guess, to put myself in the equation of, I think as a parent, sometimes we're just caring for everyone, and especially those of us in the field of also caring for people through counseling, and we can forget to include ourselves in that list of people that need to have a break and have the things that enhance our wellness, you know, so that we can come kind of full instead of so tired and worn out. I had a twitch in my eye for months because I was so tired. My daughter had rages at like 4 in the morning, like night terrors. And, you know, when you're so tired, you're not on your game anyway, no matter how much you know, or you're just worn out. And so to be able to go, you know what, I'm out of balance here. I've got to get a break is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be hard when you're new, when you have a child who's new to your family, you know, it can be challenging to make the space for that, because you're also hearing with, you know, all the TBRI, you know, the importance of connection. And I can see how it can kind of get confusing sometimes for people. And how do you take that break, you know, exactly like, so it can be challenging, but I, I remember, you know, you talking about that in the book about how we have to put on our own oxygen mask first, you know, and we have to come from that place of we are, our cup is full, so to speak. We're rested. We're coming from that place to be able to even implement the tools, for lack of probably better word, but like to even be able to do, like you're saying, if you're tired, you're going to be easily triggered, just like our kid. If you're hungry, you're going to be easily triggered, and so you don't have your full capacity, and ability, um, you know, to pick up those tools.
I think one of the other things that I thought of as you were mentioning TBRI, and it is true, like we want to nest in and attach and be the primary caregiver for our kids. But the other thing that I think we have to be mindful of as people who maybe got other people involved in their adoption story or foster care story. You know, we had lots of people at the airport, people who helped fundraise and things like that. I think, especially in the Christian community, there can be a sense of false shame and that we stay kind of isolated. So we don't want everyone to know that this is really, really hard when they were so supportive of this happening for us. And we also don't want to ruin it for the millions of other children that need help. So I think we stay silent and we stay isolated, which is not good. It's just not healthy. So we have to find a trusted community of people who can come in and speak into our lives and help us with our kiddos. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think, finding a community, a support group or something is key to your long-term survival.
Yeah.
You need, like, I feel like, you know, our kids need that place to have their voices heard. And I feel like that's what community offers us, is a place for our voice to be heard, a safe place where we're not going to be judged. They're not going to tell us how we should or shouldn't be parenting. They just give us that empathy, you know, and it's that same thing with our kids. They just need to hear our empathy. And so I feel like it's giving ourselves what we want to give to our kids by providing ourselves that place.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you also talk about, there's no room for that false shame, and that healing can only happen as pain is brought into the light in connection with God and others. And so that's kind of along the lines that we're talking about. Um, how do people go about, or how did you go about, I guess, beginning to tell your story and being comfortable and okay, with the messiness in that, and stepping out of that place of shame in this arena that we're talking about,
Yeah.
to a place where, because you're very open with your journey.
Yeah, I kind of have two speeds, all on or all off, you know. So it's like here I am, or I'm kind of hiding. So yeah, I think it out of desperation, just needing to be very candid and honest, because I just got so overwhelmed in my journey, finding other parents who are also struggling, not necessarily even adoptive parents, but parents that had kids with special needs and learning differences and things like that, that kind of tended to wear them out physically and emotionally. But yeah, just having a couple close knit friends that I felt like I could be real with, that had kind of similar shared experience and that weren't judging, but would just go to the floor and pray with me, you know. And but it definitely was hard. I think it's, for me, God's really revealed I have a lot of pride. You know, I was in a community where I spoke out, and you know, I had an adoption agency. I had a counseling ministry to adoptive families. So for me to go, hey, I'm really struggling, you know, that was hard because I think, didn't want to be discredited or feel like an imposter, that imposter syndrome. But I think at the end of the day, I've just learned, maybe with age too, like we're all struggling in one way or another, and we're here to help each other. And so who am I to kind of hide this away and not share from a place of truth and vulnerability?
Right.
So
Yeah, I would agree. It's hard when you're in leadership to also say, "Hey, I'm struggling here," even though I seem like I know it all. I'm still struggling, and um, that's where I mean, I just so appreciate that you are open and come to that place and set an example for people, because you are a professional also, and you're helping other people. And but you know, like you said, nobody's perfect. Like, we all have struggles, and you know, I mean, we just it's normalizing the fact that we all struggle is, I
right.
guess, what it's coming down to.
Yeah, and and really that there's no shame in the struggle. Like, we're human, and I think that really what this journey has caused me to do is look at my stated beliefs and my false beliefs. So at the bottom of my little iceberg, you know, are some lies that have been there, you know, from the beginning, that, you know, I have to perform and I have to do things with excellence in order to be accepted and loved. And what I've learned is, like, no, that's not true. And I know who I am, and I know my worth in Christ. And so I can be transparent, because hopefully that will connect with someone else. And if we're all pretending, then we're missing the whole role of loving each other and taking each other's burdens. And, you know, like Dan Siegel says, what's shareable is bearable.
Mm.
And so we have to share from a place of honesty.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really believe that that's part of the hard work of setting that example for our kids, is we want our kids to be able to share some of their own hurt, loss, and struggles. But if we're not willing to go down that path ourselves, we really can't tell our kids how to do that.
Yeah, because then they're glossing over as well. And, you know, as I work with adoptees as they get older, they share that. Like, they feel, some have shared with me, like they felt like they needed to kind of um, sanitize their story or clean it up, and didn't want anyone to feel bad. So they had to pretend a lot. And so that is really super unhealthy, and it's going to come out one way or another. So we just have got to create a climate in our home that says it's okay to be less than okay.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So what do you use today? Like, what is your go-tos? Maybe it's a mantra you say to yourself, maybe it's a Bible verse. Like, how do you today, now that you're kind of on this side of things, how do you maintain that? What are your tools or strategies that you use to just help yourself stay, like, keep that oxygen mask on?
Well, so I try to find small ways to be kind of present in my day, to keep things simple and to look for simple joy throughout the day, which sounds kind of trite, but I mean it. I go for walks and listen to birds, and I'm kind of a nerd when it's like I look at things in nature, and I just try to have joy in my life. And I work hard to have joy in my life, if that makes any sense. I try to make space for it. I have a dance class that I do once a week that brings me great joy. I love lavender and trees and dark chocolate, and I try to have the things and opportunities to have adventure, little ways that make me feel cared for. And I have a wonderful husband and amazing kids. I try to look at the progress that everyone has made and just feel like, okay, we're on a journey, each of us. um, but I think, to answer your question, is I try to remember who I am and to whom I belong.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love both those answers. The finding joy. I remember when I was going through a really hard time, I had a hard time finding joy within myself. And but what I but I understood the value of that. So I would look for joy even outside myself. And I think you were saying some of those things like the chocolate or whatever, but like I have a lot of butterflies and hummingbirds in my yard. And so I could see that and I would consciously acknowledge
Yeah.
that that was a wonderful, joyful thing, even though I was not fully feeling it inside of me. And so
Yeah.
I would notice joy.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Like, just being grateful for the things in the world that bring joy. The new blossoms, the this little boy that lives next door to me that interrupts my day sometimes with his giggle because he's playing in the front yard. And I love that. So looking for small things and just really appreciating the small things in life, and knowing that time is so short. And when
Mhm.
you're in the middle of of working through trauma with your kids, time feels like it is suspended forever. But before you know it, your kids are grown, and you just got to find small ways in order to sustain the care that you're trying to give. So the the simplest things sometimes are what works for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you were saying that, I was even thinking, I've done that in different periods and different seasons, even with my own challenging parenting, like my son. Like there were seasons where I would not like him, um, and so I would force myself to find those small joyful things I saw inside of him. So like appreciating his smile, like seeing him smile, and being thankful that he was smiling, whether or not it was at me, it didn't matter. But finding those even joyful qualities in my own kid and trying to focus on those things rather than the and catching myself in the negative self-talk about my dislike for my child, whatever that was at the moment.
Trying to see them, through God's eyes, or the preciousness, the divine. I call the divine design, in people, trying to see a glimpse of that in anyone that's irritating you, especially if it's your children you're living with, day in, day out, all through COVID, whatever. But trying to see that divine spark in them, and just appreciate, you know, the little things. So,
Yes. So, someone was asking before we kind of start to move towards wrapping this up. Someone was asking, at what point did you decide to write the book? And I thought, oh, that's a good question.
that is a good
What
question.
what
And
prompted you even to do that? Not everybody goes down this journey and not everybody, but people go down this journey. But you wrote a book about it.
I, I don't know. I think, honestly, looking back, it was just something I had to get out. And our family moved to Oregon, and I was really isolated there. I had family there, but everything was kind of new again, and 5 kids in the home. And I think it was just something I needed to do. It was therapeutic for me to get it out. And I also felt like it was a missing piece, that people weren't talking. Nobody was, I just wanted to shatter you know, the I don't know how to even put it, but just the barrier between what was going on in people's homes and what was being talked about. And I felt like, even in church and all the adoption ministries that I was part of, there there was a lot of talk about the children's need um, and the journey to get kids home, but not a lot of discussion about what would happen afterwards or how we could support each other afterwards. And so I think that's part of what prompted me, is just my own need to kind of shatter that false I don't know, facade of like all you have to do is bring them home and love them well and teach them and bring them to church and everything will be rosy. Like,
Right. And just learn TBRI and apply it, and life is good.
yeah. And then there was that, and that seemed like
Can't measure up.
right there, grab all these books, read all these books, you'll be fine. And, good luck to you. And yeah, I guess a little bit frustrated in that, wow, this is flipping hard for a long time. This isn't just a 6-month transition home and then everybody's going to be okay. And on the flip side of that, I had people reaching out for counseling that really I was thinking, I can't believe you haven't talked to your kids about this, or I can't, I just thought somebody's got to bring this up and be kind of proactive instead of reactive later when things aren't discussed and everything's falling apart.
So what for people who have never heard of this book, can you just briefly tell me what this book is about?
Well, this
And
book,
who it's for. What are
yeah,
you hoping to get out of it?
honestly, I just wanted to write a simple little book that would help people normalize the struggle. I wanted people to feel seen and heard, and I wanted them to also feel encouraged to go to God with everything, to not stop pursuing Him, to not stop pursuing wellness and healing within yourself. And I feel like I know so many adoptive parents that were so relentless in their fight to get kids home, whether it took multiple trips and money and, fighting embassies and, courts, but to give at least a little bit of that energy and turn it back inward so that your journey to parenting is sustainable over the long term, because kids need us like well into adulthood. And so that's why. So I wrote it, it's a simple book, it's small, but those of us that are kind of in the trenches and dealing with these type of issues, we don't have time to necessarily read some of this heavy duty material. And so I just wanted it to be relatable. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And I love that you ask questions at the end of each chapter. It's very much about just your journey too. It's not this like heady whatever, but it's actually almost like you're in a support group with just you. And I just loved it. We did it in a support group, and we all just we felt like, wow, she gets us. Like all of us were feeling that way as we were reading it. We all were just so I just love that you were inspired to do it. I love that you were brave enough to do it. And my husband and I are actually going to follow this up with in May, we're going to lead a group of people. So if anybody on this call wants to join us, we'll follow up with an email to everybody, but with the details on that. But I just love it. And
That it just it honestly blesses me so much to hear that even one, and I think when I talked to you, I only knew one person that had even had the book. So I was like, how did you even find it? But I always kind of picture myself, and maybe it's that big sister in me, that I feel like I'm on this journey up a mountain, and and it's hard, and I just want to hold my hand back to my sister behind me and say, like, watch your step right here, like this step will get you,
Mm.
be careful and step over this, and and that's all it is. I feel like I'm just barely one step ahead of anybody else reading this book, and I I don't, I'm not an expert and all that jazz. I have a lot of training, but mostly I'm just a mom who's like just a step ahead. So I just want to reach a hand back. So that makes me feel just so good to know that it's helping.
That's really sweet. And I think that says a lot about your heart. The fact that, you're one step ahead and you want to just reach back. And I was one of those people that you reached back to. And I know actually everybody in our group, you reached back to and did exactly that. Like said, ooh, that's watch out for that step. And so I love that about you.
Yeah.
So let's just wrap this up. There's three questions I ask everybody at the end of this conversation. The first one is, what brings you joy?
Yeah, I like I said, I try to make room for joy. Obviously my kids are the greatest joy of my life, and my husband as well. But I also make room for joy every day. And like, I love my dance I have a dance class with a woman named Laura Redmond who does it online. I had that today. That brings me so much joy, untangling my body. One thing I've learned is that I can't talk my anxiety down or my stress down through my thoughts. A lot of times I need to move my body.
Mhm.
And so being able to move with a group of women through, stretch appeal or whatever brings me great joy. Being in nature, I love Oregon and all things the Northwest. That brings me so much joy when I go there.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just say ditto.
Yeah.
All right. If you could say one thing to your younger self when you first started this journey, what would it be?
Um, I say this to myself now, and I hope that my daughters and my sons have also heard this, which is just know that you are worthy of love and belonging inherently because of your designer who designed you, who you belong to, and not because of anything you do or perform, but just inherently in who you were created to be. You're worthy of love and belonging. And I would also wish that my younger self knew, like, to trust that design, that God put you together with a head, a heart, and a body and a gut space that can tell you things that, I think I trusted in others more than I ever trusted in myself.
Mhm.
And I wish for my children to know, and younger people that I work with, to know how to sharpen those tools that are given to us, so that we feel confident in navigating our world, with and to ask the Lord, of course, into that process, but to be able to develop those skill sets for resilience. Yeah.
Great, another great answer. And lastly, what foster adoption myth would you like to just blow up right now?
Ugh, that's a good one. I, there's probably several, but the one that I really wish people would know is that adoptees are really the experts, and that we should be listening to more so that we can learn what it is that kids need. And one thing I hear from them is that childhood traumatic grief is a lifelong healing process. It's not something that is just kind of a plug and play. You bring the child home and plug them into a great family and then everything's going to be okay. It's a process. And so we need to begin early and normalizing that, that it's a journey, a healing journey, and that we are not afraid of their story. We're not afraid of their feelings. We're in it with them. It's them and us, it's us against all of that. It's not, we're not at war with one another.
Yes.
And so, but that myth of like, don't rock the boat, don't bring it up, don't talk about it, um, because everything seems to be okay. I think it's just wrong and really dangerous. That
Mhm.
we need to be listening and we need to be understanding that, um, that this traumatic childhood grief is profound, and it's going to play out.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I love hear that you say that. And it is a journey, and I feel like you never quite arrive. It's always a journey. I mean, if I'm at nearly 50 still healing my childhood trauma and have to revisit that at different times in my life, I
yeah,
think about that with my son. By the, when and if he chooses to get married, he's going to have to revisit some of his things. Now he's in an intimate relationship. When he has his own kids, he's probably going to have to revisit some of this about his abandonment as a child and all of these things. So it's a lifelong journey that I think all of us are on in
yes,
that. So I
yeah,
appreciate you saying that.
yeah, you get it. And yeah, and grief is part of adoption and foster care. And grief for kids looks different than it does in adults. And it is often, like you said, it's going forward. There's going to be milestones in their life that's going to unearth grief again. And so let's just be proactive in the beginning and lay a path of preventative mental health with our kids by normalizing the process of healing and being with them in that journey.
Mm. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you on today. Um, in the chat, I have put Susan's website. I invite you to purchase her book from there, and check out all her resources that she has. And again, we'll be following you up with an email if you want to join our um, our book study, our support group, as we go through Relentless together, as well as I just wanted to read a quote you had from Dr. Purvis, that you can't take a child on a path that you have never traveled. So if you would like to join us on that journey, we welcome you.